Coin traders, what is going on? Algo fam, how we doing? Thanks for joining me for the show, looking at Algorand, ALGO on that ticker. Overall, a pretty nasty day for most of the altcoin and crypto space. We did have earlier a lot of cryptos down double digits, and right now not necessarily the best setup for Algorand too, especially since on the current daily candle, we are looking at prices now being the lowest that we've seen for the year so far, and breaking bearish below this massive 14.84 support line that we have seen as support earlier in the year, back on the 23rd of January, and then also coming off of the big flush in the 13th of April here. If we do look left here, previously big point of resistance, and then we flipped it into support. So the fact that we have back tested it, support, and support once again a few days ago, just before now breaking below that, is definitely more of a bearish sign, but we do still have a little bit of time left on the day where we could actually see the bulls maintain a price close on top of that. So a little bit of rally now playing out. So if we actually look over here into the shorter term on the 4 hour, a little bit of a bounce. If we actually look at the volume, actually the most significant amount of a bullish volume that we have seen since last month, almost a month ago, back in May, where we actually had a pretty big pop off here. And so right now, do need to see a little bit more of that follow through. Could actually get on the shorter term a little bit more pullback, but do need to actually start to rally and test some of these upper resistance points. And not only for price levels, but also for exponential moving average as well, which on the shorter term, definitely running to the downside, and then also on the daily as well. One thing I did want to look at though for this 4 hour chart is that if we pull up the RSI, Relative Strength Index, I do want to point out how we're looking at 4 points of higher lows on RSI. And then also on the closes, we're looking at 4 points of lower lows on this price level. So this RSI is set to be based on the close of the prices. So looking at the closes of these candles, decreasing, and increasing RSI. So a huge signal for a lot of bullish divergence here coming in. So do need to see that play out. And obviously, we could continue to get more. Nothing is scientific here, but just know that that is a sign that we are going to be looking at here on this chart based off of the RSI. And a lot of bullish divergence in that instance here. So yeah, right now, if we do look back to the daily, what we are looking for is a support coming in pretty much what we saw in the late part of the fall here from November to early December here last year. So basically looking at the heart line, and if we pull up VPVR, volume profile visible range, you can see where that does fall. Here to the downside, about 13.4 cents. So ideally, if we can't hold the current level and actually maintain a close on top of that 14.84 level, that is going to be the likely next downside target here, especially. We're going to be looking down to the 14.2 level. And then from there, like we mentioned, down to about 13.3 on the low side. Probably not expecting prices to get any much lower than that for a significant amount of time before seeing a little bit of a bounce. But up overhead, we do have plenty of resistance here showing up. And one of the things that we need to go ahead and be aware of is that on the upside, we have very significant price level resistances here coming in. So assuming we do maintain support here at 14.84, going to have a strong resistance coming up overhead at 15.85. And then following that, we're going to have a big resistance at 16.43. So if we go ahead and look at these price levels, huge points of support, big level of closing support before putting in the trend high. And then also if we do zoom out here and actually look left, this is where we did find our low and our bounce here back in the December of 2022. Before the initial move here that did pull back to leading to our all-time low for Algorand here. So plenty of reasons we are going to have resistance up overhead. And like we even see zoomed out on this VPVR, plenty of previous trading history at those levels to leading us to having plenty of upside resistance. So like we mentioned too, big resistance coming overhead at the exponential moving averages. And if we go ahead and turn off VPVR and flip into the 2-day chart, you can just see how relevant on this 2-day these exponential moving averages are. So the fact that now we are starting to get a little bit more of a gap between the 50, the 26, and the 12, those will align up with these resistance points. So going to be a big resistance point up overhead. So do need a lot of sentiment to shift in the overall crypto space. Now we could have a little bit of an oversold bounce here coming in because we do actually have to flip off of these exponentials at some point. And then also on the daily RSI as well. Not necessarily overextended just yet, but this is the lowest that we have seen pretty much since the, if we do go ahead and negate the April pullback, this is about the lowest that we have seen. And even considering that too, since we have actually found our low back in September of 2023 here. So despite not being oversold just yet, we know that on some of the shorter term charts, and this is the 2-day, by the way. So if we go ahead and flip over to the daily, you can see as well, still not overextended, but do have potential to actually run to the downside there. But if we actually do get a hold and actually see RSI retrace, that would be bearish divergence here on the price closes, since we are getting lower lows compared to where we actually found our oversold extension. Flipping over to the weekly chart here, and people have been talking about this head and shoulders pattern here for algo, now getting a little bit more of that confirmation now, especially if we do look at the neckline being at 15.85. So since we have broken that now, we are actually, 14.84 has been the lower price line, and even for that resistance point over here too. So the fact that now we have broken that effective neckline, if we were looking at that being a good indication, and even if we did look at a trend line, for example, as being this neckline as well, obviously huge pullback, especially since this does actually rally up over here. So big obvious trend line that did break here, and now despite having a little bit more of that downside pullback breaking this level, that does put us at the risk of actually having some more of the lower downside supports, like we mentioned, down to the 13-cent level. So 13.58 would be the next downside target if in fact we don't hold a close for the weekly on top of this 14.84 cent level. That obviously puts us down to the defense of support coming in at 13.58. Now, putting up some technicals here on the weekly, RSI's been pulling back well below this exponential moving average. So typically when we have seen this be below the moving average, we do get a little bit more of that pullback scenario here as highlighted kind of on a lot of these moves, but not necessarily thinking that's going to lead to new lower lows. Although nothing is impossible in this crypto space right now, especially since we have been seeing the stochastic RSI this far smashed below the 20 line. Last time we have seen it, and the last previous times, if we actually go ahead and look at the price here, you can see that we did have a little bit of move on this initial time, but once we actually flipped bullish here, it actually took almost half a year here when we actually did see our longer term growth finally get above that price. Yes, we're looking about 147 to 154 days. So effectively about 5 months here going on. And so hopefully that wouldn't be the case here, since that would put us into about November. But typically and historically, this phase of a crypto cycle does still lead a little bit more flatlined or even potentially slightly bearish. And so we could get that playing off as well before a fall starts to kick off any bullish side action. And obviously that's just speculative based off of historic patterns so far. And yeah, ideally we would love to see the stochastic RSI as well as RSI break to the upside. But right now, nothing necessarily driving that, especially since the trend right now on the shorter and longer terms are still in a bearish setup here. So overall, right now, still unfortunately in a very bearish setup here along with the rest of crypto, and shorter terms are definitely driving the markets right now. So until we see the trend change on the shorter term, we're still going to be looking at some longer term downside targets here. So eyes are going to be on the shorter term 4-hour and 1-hour first. And then once we start to change trends on that, we will start to look at the little bit more longer terms, 12-hour daily and 2-day here. But yeah, so otherwise that is going to wrap up the update and show for Algorand, ALGO on that ticker. Hope you all enjoyed the show. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. And don't forget to let me know your thoughts, comments, issues, disagreements, predictions, all that stuff down in the comment sections below or over on Twitter at coin_trades is the handle here over on Twitter or X. Looking forward to chatting with everyone there. And yeah, otherwise do appreciate all the continuous love and support. As always, does mean so much. Stay safe, take care everyone, and I will catch you back in the next video.